And the problem also, um, I never thought of myself as much of a cultural commentator, but I seem to be going back to this line of thought. Maybe it's because I'm old now. Like, we don't seem to be encouraging in our society propagation of the understanding of seriousness of this kind of art, such that we're not we're just not educating younger people that this is even a thing anymore. Like the classic idea of art, we've taught people the fashion idea of art, right? Um, and so I kind of don't even blame people if they don't, if they think the witness isn't very good or whatever, because I don't know, for whatever reason they don't like it. Um, because we're kind of not like I'm doing a kind of a thing that we don't even culturally equip people to know is a thing. Whether they agree with it or not, or whether they think it's good. Like people are perfectly free to be sophisticated and still think my games are bad. I'm like not saying that at all, but I am just saying that like like let's go back to movies and stuff. Like basically all the popular movies are these superhero movies, right? And like story wise, they have a certain very simplistic form of story that is kind of mostly the same between all the movies. It's the same shape, and you change out the character names and stuff, and you maybe have some different jokes, right? Um, Even that is very different from the storytelling in film tradition that we used to have. And so that just affects people over a long time. Like their picture of what a story in a movie is has changed because of that, right? And I don't know, I just worry about that broadly across all of culture, not just games. I don't know, I'm pretty far off track at this point, so let's let's cut that response there. I feel like I had something that was important there, but I don't know.
Well, something that speaks to me is the idea that the you know the youth, the people these days who are engaging with products, if we want to use a more global term, um, what they seem to be getting at or getting out of them is what they've been primed to get out of everything that came before. And I think this is like a truism in a sense, but if you're only ever served up superhero movies, if you don't possess yourself to go look up Twitter accounts that will send you stained glass images and or old Renaissance paintings and examples of visual art that are very different than what you generally come into contact with these days. If you yourself are not the driving force on an individual level for changing the diet of art and of media that you consume, then you're not really going to develop a taste for anything other than what is algorithmically given to you and what the big dogs and the of any industry that you might be a part of as a consumer. If you're not seeking alternative things, then you're not going to find them just by accident usually, or at least if to the degree that you are, it's going to be very minimal. And I think that there is a concern there because if you don't if that goes on for a long enough time scale, then what we're seeing this is something Reagan Burns brought up in his episode, his appearance on this channel was that there's a very small subset of things that can constitute a movie, and a very small subset of things that appear to constitute a game, where like a game's writer is a seemingly like a de facto obvious thing that you have to have on every game staff, and just the idea that a game has to have a story that you write in a narrative sense, which requires a writing team, is like a base assumption that's made by all sorts of different developers, all sorts of different publishers, and so the point he was illustrating, I think, is that actually the number of things that games can be in the eyes of most of the consumers, and we can argue as to where that comes from. Maybe it comes from the developers also thinking this, but basically that number of things is getting smaller, not larger, even though our computational power is increasing in some ways and our the population is increasing of the world, so theoretically there would be more ideas. But it seems like we're getting the opposite, and this is reflected in news and reflected in world events, and like there's one opinion you could have, and there's one take you can give out, and like so the array of things that you can actually engage with, the array of things you can say or watch without having to put in the effort, which might be uncomfortable or even disastrous in some situations, depending on how charged the subject is, that's getting smaller. Like the amount of things is getting smaller. And to whatever degree your motivations are known to you, reverse engineering them from playing your games and listening to a lot of your appearances on other shows and your speeches, it seems to be that you're trying to push for something not just different for the sake of being different, but at least if it is different and different in a meaningful way, then it's going to challenge people to think more broadly and basically force them to exist in a space where the array of things is made wider. Even on your Twitter page, your description, I believe, still says working on good new things. And when I first saw that, I even thought, wow, that's kind of funny because nobody thinks of like new things as necessarily always being good, and I guess that's fine. But it feels like the number of things that should be good and new, like that shouldn't be such a weird thing to think about. Like, oh, this new thing is also a good thing, but where is it? Where are all the good new things? And do you think that this is like a big motivating factor for you? This thought of like where society, where Western culture is drifting towards, perhaps, is that like we're finding less appreciation for things that are not immediately comfortable to us?
Yeah, I think viewing it on a societal level like that has become more of a recent interest of mine. Going back further, it was always just more about what I personally am interested in, right? But at some point, you get to be a certain age and you look around and you're like, why am I so alone in terms of what I'm interested in, right? Like where are all the people, like when I was a kid and I was interested in this, because I got interested in some idea of what I thought art was, or about how the thing that I said about how you make things well or whatever. I mean, I had some idea of that even at a relatively young age. And you sort of always picture like, well, when you grow up and be a big successful adult, you'll be in a place where this is understood by many, whatever. And then you get there and you're like, oh, well, you know, the Eternals is opening at the box office today or whatever. Like, I just, I kind of look around and I'm like, what happened, dude? Like, the culture that I imagined that I would be part of is not what it is. And maybe that's just how it always is. But I also feel like there is a big element of trend toward infantilization in our culture that's been going on for decades. And there's a writer called Benjamin R. Barber who picked this out, um, I don't know, more than 10 years ago. And yeah, like we do seem to, maybe it's because these are somehow the things that are the most commercializable, or there's fewer frictions on, but like we seem to be gravitating as a mass toward things that are more baby-like and less sophisticated. And this has become, so now, I never thought of this before, but as being so intertwined in it, but now like the way everyone talks about everything on Twitter is like extremely oversimplified and baby-like as well. But I didn't used to think of this as being a discourse thing. I used to think of it just as like an art and literature and fashion thing or whatever, right? Um, but there's definitely, if you go back to like the 19, I don't know, 50s or 60s or something, and you think about like what was the image of an adult of those times and what did an adult do? Maybe younger people these days don't even have a very clear picture of that because it's like faded. But like, or even the 1940s, like before and during World War II, what was an adult like, and what was an adult's day like, and what did they do for entertainment, and what were they interested in? And like, I kind of feel like that has changed uh, in a downhill way, right? And maybe that's actually an optical illusion, but I kind of feel like it's not. Um, that said, um, so there's a Coen Brothers movie called Barton Fink, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's a good movie. Good movie. Uh, but it's a fictionalized. I forget the name of the author. Um, but it's a fictionalized version of the life or part of the life of Clifford Odets is the author. There's a guy named Clifford Odets who was a playwright and went to Hollywood in the early 1900s, and um, he was like a sophisticated writer and got sucked up in this like dumbed down Hollywood writing thing. And in this movie, they're like, we want you to write a wrestling picture. And he comes back with this sophisticated film. And they're like, no, it's a wrestling picture. The guy starts out and he gets beat, and then he takes a kid or a girlfriend under his wing, and then he has a final fight where he wins. We want you to write that, right? And so, I mean, clearly that's been a thing the whole time, right? Or for this past century. So maybe it's an optical illusion, but I feel like there's less and less now as time goes on of things that are not wrestling picture, right? Like back then, if you wanted to go see the wrestling picture, that's great. And if you wanted to see other stuff, you could find it. And now it becomes hard to find it. Like I don't even know if I want to engage in art that's meaningful to me, if I want to expand my mind and do something that's going to open new doors for me in some way, and it's like a film or a novel, I feel like I have to go back and look at old stuff because there's not that much in the way of new stuff that's going to do that. And secondly, it feels like so much work to just try and do that because like there's all this stupid social media stuff that people read and all that, and it's like the low hanging fruit in terms of effort. And yeah, it feels like work to read books sometimes. I've retrained myself to read books, but it took a little bit. Like I had to do it. Like I reread in, this year, I've read like 3,000 page books and a few, and these were like they were like science fiction books or whatever. They're not like old great literature or whatever. Old great literature tends to be shorter than 1,000 page books. Um, So I think I've got my brain doing that again, but there were definitely a few years during which it didn't want to do that. I don't know what any of that means.
I think it means we're in a strange position as far as art and media is concerned, and what the role of it all is. And
Yeah.
these are interesting questions to think about as a designer. I think because
Now, as I say this stuff, I
mm,
can imagine the person on the internet who's going to be like, "Oh, he's just being a snobby elitist, blah blah blah, whatever." But like the trajectory of over time the trajectory over time of our culture in terms of like what level of sophistication are we able to summon at all, like that does actually matter. Like if we're not able to like think relatively complex thoughts anymore, and we're not able to wrestle with nuance and um, things that can't be boiled down into one simple interpretation or another simple interpretation. Well, first of all, I mean, that just seems like a much less rich kind of a life to live. But secondly, we're in a complicated world where like we need good problem solving abilities. Like we need competent, complex people who can look at the situation and do good, effective things in response to the situation. And that's like hard. And if we're training people to be dumb, we're not doing ourselves any favors in terms of where we're going as a world, right? So that's kind of why this bugs me. I don't know. Like the thing, I feel like I said this lately. Maybe it was on the last podcast. I don't know if every single word that I'm saying is like a repeat of last podcast, but like, so when I was a kid, I would come home from school and I would watch a lot of like cartoons or whatever on TV, and that's fine. A lot of them were kind of stupid. I would watch lots of TV shows like in the 80s, not particularly uh, great art, right? And spent many, 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 many hours doing these things. And I can see now the opportunity cost of what if I had spent that time productively, or even just consuming better art as opposed to like watching fucking Knight Rider and Airwolf when I came home from school all the time or whatever. If anyone these days even knows what those shows were. Um, so that's one thing. But another thing is there was kind of this idea back then, because, you know, I'm Gen X, and Gen X has this sort of self-deprecating, stereotypical idea about like, we're all immersed in pop culture and pop culture is kind of trash, but that's what we're doing. It's actually kind of complicated, like what we developed there. But there was this idea when I was a kid or whatever of like, you know, TV is going to rot your brain and whatever. And everyone was like, haha, isn't that funny? But like nobody, like people also, I think, knew that it was true a little bit, but they also didn't want to stop and think like, what if this is actually true a little bit or a lot, right? And now I can look back and be like, yeah, TV rotted my brain in a certain way. Like I probably would have been much better off, both in terms of like life achievement, but also like socially and all these things, if I had spent that time that I was watching TV doing other stuff. Not all of it, but like a lot of it. And then the time that I spent watching TV, watching higher quality programs or something, right? Um, and the thing is now we're in an environment where there are more and more things that rot your brain. Like movies didn't used to always rot your brain. There used to be some good movies, and now there's like hardly any. Um, Now there's just like all this internet clickbait stuff that rots your brain, right? And games can rot your brain, you know, and like especially so the most brain rotting games of all in the current environment right now, I think, are like these iOS time wasting games that are like, you know, just designed to get you to sit there and like, you know, feel like you're doing some activity and then click on the ads once in a while or whatever, right? Um, and all these things added together, it's way more than I had to deal with when I was a kid. And so, like, I just don't know what the outcome of all this is. If it is true that my brain was kind of rotted by TV to some degree, how much worse off are people going to be today who are like 12 years old right now or whatever? Um, I'm concerned about this. And I think we all should be concerned about it. And I don't think it's elitist to be concerned about it because it is actually the well-being of everybody depends on this. It's not about being highbrow or lowbrow, right? It's about everybody.